Getting to a book signing and a fart broke out.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, once again, thank you everybody for taking the time on your Saturday to come out. So many great faces, and I won't take time to do a roll call again. There's too many people here now for that. But what I can assure you is that everybody here means something great to me, and that's no exaggeration. Writing for me has been a lifeblood ever since I started majoring in journalism at Chapman University in 1995, I think, is when I declared a major. And it is what it is. You can Google my age anyway. I do that. And I got this here. But I will say, you know, I fell in love with writing because I think that the voice is the most suppressed piece for so many of us. You know, it's one thing to have money or have prestige or power or some form of tangible status in this world, but no matter where you reside or what rung of the ladders you exist on socioeconomically or with respect to power, no one can ever take away the voice if you choose to begin to kind of use it in a way that has efficacy in this world, man. And I just thought, why in the world wouldn't you ever use your voice to impact the lives of other people? You know what I mean? If your voice is only for monetary, you know, the self-aggrandizement and things of that nature, for me, that just never made sense. And so it's very special to be able to publish at all. You know, I got a chance to do that in college with journalism and being in the newspaper and stuff. And, you know, you kind of hone your craft and you don't know that you're honing your craft, you know, while you're doing it. You think you're just kind of going through the drill and you graduate one day and all that stuff. But what I've come to find out is that every episode of your life, from the time you show up to the day you push those daisies up, none of it is wasted, and none of it is futile. All of it is colorful, you know, and it's meant to be not only a blessing to you, but it's meant to teach you something. And so for me, the title of this book, Bloods, Crips, and Starship, I'll explain the title and then I'll explain the subtitle. Bloods, Crips, and Starship is just like it sounds. On the first part, I grew up, the first probably 14 years of my life or so, in a place that was heavily impacted by gang activity. I was born the year Vietnam ended, and from the mid-70s on through the 80s was the advent of a different period of time in Los Angeles. You know, there wasn't the black solidarity that we sang about and that we read about in the history books. You know, this was the crack era. And anybody who knows that part of town, you know, from Inglewood to Compton to South Central to Linwood, you know, all of these places were a part of a very complex organism of people, I think, really struggling in a desperate space, you know, trying to figure out what does it mean to be black, what does it mean to be urban, and what does it mean to survive, right? And so when you're just kind of like, boom, placed into that, like I found as a kid, you're navigating that, but at the same time, I was lucky because I had my mother and I had my grandmother and I had all my grandparents, and I had a lot of love surrounding me. But that allowed me to be kind of this like positive deviant, you know what I mean? I was able to exist and navigate the tough stuff while believing that there was more possible. So every day, you know, even though there were Bloods and Crips everywhere, so to speak, and I went to some, you know, a couple funerals and stuff for friends of mine, I was still able to kind of believe that there was something else, that there was more. And so every day, starting in 1984, I took a school bus, for 5 years, I took a school bus to Woodland Hills from 48th and Avalon and from 101st to McKinley and some different areas. And it was, as I often tell when I get a chance to speak, it was 2 buses in the morning. It was at first it was just walking to the school bus stop. My mom remembered, you know, 49th Street School and catching the school bus. And my mom put me in this program called Permit Transportation, and it was my way out. It was like a conduit to opportunity and exposure, you know. I didn't go to school in the neighborhood anymore, and it really was my portal to see that if I applied myself, you know, if I could just figure out and stay consistent, and maybe there was more. But, you know, you would come home and you'd be like, gosh, I really want this opportunity for my brothers, you know, my friends. You know, like some of them didn't have the same situation as me. So I knew there was something different about my navigation because I really felt that there was more possible, but I know there were friends of mine who didn't feel that, you know. And by the same token, the Starship part really is pointing, there's a chapter devoted to it in the book, but Starship is, there's a group called Jefferson Starship in the 70s, and they dropped the Jefferson in 1985. They had this hit album, and they had some jams on that album, but it wasn't the kind of jams that a lot of the urban dudes listen to. So, you know, when you're singing rock ballads or soft rock ballads, and dudes is out here rapping, they were like, you know, I mean, I kind of kept my musical taste to myself, you know. And yes, I still listen to hip hop, and I was all about, you know, Eric B. and Rakim, but at the same time, don't sleep on Steely Dan, don't sleep on Hall & Oates, you know, don't sleep on Phil Collins. Right? You know, like good music is good music, right? But for me, Bloods, Crips, and Starship, the title's about navigating the gray space. We don't really live, in my opinion, in a black and white world. Although we live in a black and white world in some respects. So it's kind of a play on words, you know, but how I learned, whether it be in the space of being, for me, I grew up a Christian. I am clergy, went to seminary and all that stuff, which he gives me a hard time about all the time. That's Ron, one of my teammates. Honestly, go ahead and record this because I'm gonna say it. One time, one of the best basketball players I've ever played with right here. I'll never say that again.
No one believes you anyway. It's fine.
Probably believe that anyway. But
You and I played.
we have played. And you also are one of the best shooters. But with all respect, I think that self-leadership is a theory, and leadership theory is what I study at Gonzaga and what I choose to continue the PhD piece. Since 2014, I've been looking at what kind of leadership really affects how we live. You know, I've looked at how we serve as leaders, how we bring authenticity to the spaces that we're in, and as a teacher, you know, these some of my former students out there, gosh, they know better than anybody because they saw me every day. And they'll tell you the kind of things I talk about, but I really came to believe that much of our despondency and our negativity comes from focusing on things that we can't control. But when God gives us the opportunity, whether you're a subscriber to faith or not, you know, however you look at it, I think we all have the autonomy and the agency to actually control some things if we put the energy into it. Like how do we love? How do we forgive? And how do we regroup from trauma? These are all things that fall in the space of we can't control the outcomes all the time, but we can live by principles that put us in a great space. So for me, that's a little bit about the title, and I thought maybe I'd read a little bit from one of the chapters. So, huh? You want me to read the Starship?
No.
I could.
That's the one you were gonna do.
No, that's actually good. Let's do that. I'm gonna go to chapter 15, titled Starship, and read a little bit about that. Uh-oh, spoiler alert. So, sorry about that. All right. And then, you know, if you have any questions, I don't know where we all are in the way of who's read what, but I'll answer anything you want. All right, so I'll start this chapter off in 15. In 1985, after succeeding the music project Jefferson Starship, the rebranded rock band Starship released its debut studio album, Knee Deep in the Hoopla, right? It featured a song titled Sarah that became a best-selling single in 1986, and that's the jam that got my attention. It wasn't about a girl named Sarah. Like for me, it wasn't like I met this girl named Sarah and was like, oh, no, it wasn't that. I just liked the song. My wife. It was a signature 80s rock ballad with electric keyboard riffs, the drum pad, electronic harmonica, rockish lead tenor vocals, and chorus harmonies. Sarah, Sarah, storms are brewing in your eye. You know, the refrain went. There was no vibrato nor soulful vocalizing runs in the high tenor lead vocals of Mickey Thomas. But I did not need all music to sound like R&B singers like Charlie Wilson or soloist Stephanie Mills. The school bus radio had already exposed me to Phil Collins' power ballads and synthesized instrumentations of Scritti Politti and The Sister. I may have lived among Bloods and Crips, but I was a budding music enthusiast whose musical taste was more integrated than his daily life. It was not until my undergraduate studies that the word diaspora entered my vocabulary. It means the displacement of a people from their native land. I think back to childhood and have a better understanding of why the education about African heritage and black leadership was so persistent in my communities. Scattered stuff can get lost, diluted, and amalgamated. My son sometimes pours something mysterious into my water and then smiles when I can't figure out what he mixed. Because at the time of this writing, he was about 7 years old. I was not the victim of spiking. We talking Capri Sun type mocktails that cause my face to contort as he laughs. It's easy to lose the essence once something is diminished. And that makes me a son of the diaspora. It also means that my learning true masculinity was a conflagration of competing messages, many of which were toxic. Men told me that a man is supposed to provide for his family by pretty much any means necessary. Men don't nurture and don't need to spend time with their kids as a priority. I can't imagine saying that to a man in the 1970s, 80s South Central Los Angeles. There's some parts here that might not be for Miles, so I don't know. But he's busy, so I don't know. Should I read it? I'll just go. I can't imagine saying to a man in the 1970s, 80s, South Central Los Angeles, bruh, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think you've been emotionally unavailable of late. Unadulterated retorts might sound like, boy, you better get out of my damn face with that feminine shit. Act like you got a pair of nuts. Fuck I look like. Florida Evans or something? Just, There's a more sanitized version of this from the hyper-masculine Christian males, but you need only delete the expletives to see the translation. When I was going through my divorce, I was told to accept whatever custody arrangement materialized, because after all, men just need to be there some of the time, particularly for boys and especially when they are older. Fatherhood was presented to me as a distinctly separate part of manhood than the role of a husband, and much more important. Most of the dads I knew growing up were suspected of infidelity, but if that man was handling his business by clothing and feeding his offspring, that was a real man. Now I knew that something felt weird about that estimation of fatherhood, but I also understood some of the emphasis in light of how few educated black men I saw in my community. And this is not to say that the men in my church, on my block, at my football practices were stupid. They were not. The majority of them were blue-collar working class men who had not gone to college. Some were former military and even Vietnam veterans, since that was my parents' generation. The black men in my community were either natives of South Los Angeles, Inglewood, Compton, and surrounding areas, or they were imports from the historically segregated South, who had come to Southern California for more opportunity. They were often one of two generations removed from living in the South, the part of the United States most associated with de jure racism, Jim Crow oppression, and civil rights struggle. There were resident attributes consistent with these men, the hallmarks of the black father. Those qualities were modeled and prescribed. Among the chief virtues I observed by watching fathers in my community were physical protection of the family, expectation of female subservience, care for all of outdoor responsibilities of the home, sexual independence from criticism, and commanded respect. Defining black fatherhood, even now that I am a black father, can feel like an 11-year-old girl describing childbirth because her baby brother was born yesterday. I never had a present father. While I have known many black fathers, they were often non-examples. For one reason or another, the hyperbolic obsession with provision in a caste society where that ability is grossly impaired always confused me. I was also bewildered by the other four messages described above. Of course, in my case, there was a vacuum, a void that I had to fill with coaches, pastors, and the like. And that's just a little bit from the Starship chapter.
Snap, brother, snap.
Brother Richard.
Snap, sir.
That's Richard Johnson back there. Richard Johnson is one of my eldest friends and